Queridos colegas, muy buenas tardes.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon once again. We'd like to welcome the Fisheries and Oceans Commissioner to his committee. So we've been meeting since this morning, and the last item that we've been discussing is aquaculture in Europe, bearing in mind the latest reports from the European Court of Auditors. And I'm sure we'll be touching upon this and sustainable fisheries in our discussion with you. So this is the first time you come to this committee after your hearing, so thank you very much for coming. And thank you very much for saying, as you did in your hearing, that you want to work hand in glove with the European Parliament and that you're available to come and meet the committee regularly. This is your committee, and we'd like to thank you very much because your contribution is extremely important for MEPs because the work is done together with the European Commission. The European Parliament, the European Commission have to work together for fisheries and for the whole of Europe, and we'll have an opportunity to talk about all the relevant issues. Thank you very much for being here this afternoon. Let us kick off with 15 minutes for the Commissioner. You know that he will be giving us his introductory remarks, and then each coordinator will be given 3 minutes each. And then after we take the coordinators, we'll open up the floor to the rest of the MEPs. And after each round, the Commissioner will provide his answers. And we'll try and make sure that everyone gets a chance to ask Commissioner Kadis what they want to ask. Mr. Costas Kadis, once again, welcome. I'd like to give you the floor. As I said before, this is your committee. You have the floor, and we'll start work with you and your team.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Carmen. Honourable members of the PECH Committee, indeed, I'm very pleased to be with you again and to have this first structured dialogue on European Union fisheries and ocean policy since my confirmation hearing. And thank you very much for inviting me today. And I would like to let you know that I will be always at your disposal, and I will seek this cooperation and this open communication with the PECH Committee. To start with, I want to underline again that the creation of a dedicated fisheries and oceans portfolio is a recognition by the Commission of the importance of the fisheries and aquaculture sectors for our food security and coastal communities and cities. This is very evident in the communication on the vision for agriculture and food adopted today by the Commission, where fisheries are explicitly acknowledged as a strategic sector for food security. As we acknowledged several times, the sector is facing a number of challenges: sustainability, level playing field, competition for maritime space, and the need for modernization. The solutions need to take into account the specificities of both our small-scale fishers and our large-scale and distance water fleets, and they must also take into account the specificities of each sea basin. One of my important priorities for 2025 will be the adoption of the Ocean Pact. Our ocean, as you know, is facing pressing challenges: policy fragmentation, environmental degradation, and a significant need for new resources. And our existing policies, which are sometimes not aligned, weaken effective ocean governance. In response to these challenges, I see the Ocean Pact as a way of uniting all EU ocean-related policies including fisheries, into a cohesive and coherent framework that reaffirms our commitment to preserve our ocean's future for all. This pact must be ambitious, actionable, and include all sectors and stakeholders to build a sustainable future for our ocean and a resilient and competitive blue economy for our coastal communities. It must also be implementable so that it can be meaningful. Our goal is to establish strategic pillars within this unified policy, ensuring a healthy and productive ocean through biodiversity protection, boosting the European Union's sustainable blue economy with special emphasis on fisheries and aquaculture, expanding the European Union's marine knowledge framework, reinforcing international ocean governance, and developing resilience and opportunities for coastal communities and cities. We recently initiated a call for evidence to gather comprehensive insights, and this Friday we will hold a high-level roundtable to launch a fisheries and ocean dialogue, marking an important step in our journey. On the 5th of March, during the annual European Ocean Days, we will host a significant stakeholder consultation, bringing together diverse perspectives to enrich our collective understanding. Oceans, including the Ocean Pact, will also feature on the agenda of the March European Council meeting in recognition of the crucial political importance of this initiative. Our goal is to present the Ocean Pact at the United Nations Ocean Conference in June, showcasing it as a model of sustainable ocean governance. Today, I'm eager to hear your expectations for the Ocean Pact as a key deliverable of this mandate. Another priority during my mandate is evaluating the Common Fisheries Policy Regulation. We must ensure the rules of the Common Fisheries Policy are fit for purpose and effective to ensure the competitiveness of the fisheries and aquaculture sectors in a healthy marine environment. This evaluation will reflect on 11 years of CFP implementation in its three dimensions: the economic, the environmental, and the social, building also on previous consultations and studies. And we will examine fishing vessels modernization and decarbonization, capacity ceilings, and onboard safety. We will also look at the way we assess fish stocks and manage them in the context of climate change and evaluate maximum sustainable yield. And we will look at the ecosystem approach, scientific advice, the way quotas are distributed between different fleet segments, the landing obligation, and the specificities of multi-annual plans for the different sea basins. The fishing profession plays a central role in this evaluation, with a focus on the role of women, generational renewal and skills development. The evaluation will take into account the current geopolitical context and the multiple challenges. The public consultation was launched on the 27th of January and will run until April 2025. And I count on your support to ensure broad participation, comprehensive input from the coastal communities of your countries. As I was committed during my hearing, our intention is to build on the positive elements of the CFP regulation and address the weaknesses that will be pointed out by the evaluation, if needed, with legislative action. Another issue which I consider an important part of my portfolio, is the uptake of aquaculture. You referred to this issue at the beginning, dear Carmen. I have seen the very positive results of it in my own country, Cyprus. And I would like to draw your attention to the promotion of campaign to increase awareness, understanding and acceptance of aquaculture in the European Union that I will launch on the 24th of March. Honourable members, you know that I am personally committed to being close to our fishers and aquaculture producers in order to truly understand their challenges and to show that the European Union is close to them. This is the reason why I have started a series of visits to coastal communities and cities around the European Union, with more planned in the next few months. And I have already expressed my wish to have you with me during these visits. I also want to highlight the implementation dialogues, which every college member is expected to hold at least twice a year. These dialogues offer opportunities to meet with stakeholders, evaluate policy objectives, and to address any implementation. I want to ensure that our policies work well and that they are aligned with realities on the ground. I intend to organise the first implementation dialogue still before summer break. Let me now turn to the planned energy transition roadmap. This roadmap will outline a strategic path towards climate neutrality and more competitive fisheries sector by 2050. The roadmap intends to address regulatory, economic and financial aspects, along with innovation, research, skills and data. Stakeholders' input will shape this evidence-based strategy, and we invite you to actively participate to address the fisheries sector's needs effectively. And I'm grateful for the Parliament's support, in particular the €2.2 million pilot project you initiated, High to Fish, which allows to test various technologies on a real fishing vessel. And this is a pivotal for identifying knowledge gaps and enhancing energy transition understanding. Honourable members, I mentioned earlier the upcoming Ocean Pact, which should address policy fragmentation and ensure more coherence across ocean-related policies. The best example illustrating this urgent need for a more coherent policy approach is the Baltic Sea. The Baltic Sea faces an ecosystem shift which is related to multiple factors, including eutrophication, pollution, climate change and misreporting of fishing activities. The lack of full implementation of relevant environmental protection legislation is contributing to this ecosystem shift. I will continue to push for a truly holistic approach to the Baltic Sea, in line also with our Baltic Declaration, and I'm working hand in hand also with my colleague Commissioner Roswell to achieve this. Our intention is to organise a new conference on the Baltic Sea as soon as possible. Our aim will be to discuss ways to address the worrying decline of its biodiversity. When it comes to concrete fisheries management rules, we are looking at weaknesses and strengths of the multi-annual plans as part of the CFP evaluation. Honourable members, as we prioritise critical initiatives like the Ocean Pact, CFP evaluation, energy transition roadmap and the Baltic Sea challenges over the next few years, I want to emphasise the necessity of establishing a level playing field with third countries to ensure competitiveness in our fisheries and aquaculture sectors. In that regard, I trust the new fisheries control system in the IT catch system and the new traceability rules which will gradually enter into force. I will persist in ensuring zero tolerance for IUU fishing and promoting our high standards in international fora, bilaterally and in regional fisheries management organizations, the RFMOs. An important tool to ensure a level playing field towards third countries is the recent Commission proposal relating to countries allowing non-sustainable fishing practices. And it is very important to proceed with this regulation as soon as possible. I count on you to adopt the Parliament's negotiating mandate as soon as possible so that we can start trilogues and conclude negotiations before the end of the Polish presidency. The Council has already established its negotiating position and is ready for trilogues. I will further develop a strategic approach for an EU ocean diplomacy and ensure that the EU leads the way on international ocean governance, notably at the United Nations Ocean Conference in Nice in 2025. Concretely, I will do everything I can to ensure the ratification of the Treaty on Biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction by EU member states and by third countries. Last but not least, the continued access for EU vessels to UK waters after 2026 will be one of my priorities, as well as fairness in the fisheries relations with Norway. Dear Chair, honourable members of the PECH Committee, to conclude, I am confident that I can count on your support to advance this ambitious agenda to the benefit of our precious ocean and our fishers and aquaculture producers in our coastal communities. Together, we can ensure a sustainable future and a thriving marine environment for generations to come. I thank you for your attention, and I now look forward to your questions and suggestions.
Muchas gracias, Comisario.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And now open up to coordinators, and hopefully we can allow all of those who have asked for the floor to speak. So, begin with the EPP group. Mr. Mato, 3 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for the fact that you've shown sensitivity since taking up your role. You've ensured dialogue with the European Parliament, but also dialogue with the sector. It's just 3 questions. I think these are urgent, but I think you would know these already. But I do have to mention them. Firstly, the Western Mediterranean and the need to change the multi-annual plan for demersals in this area. We've said it repeatedly. Measures which are adopted by the Council are based on a proposal from the Commission which didn't take into account any of the best scientific data available, nor socioeconomic issues. The plans are unworkable for the fishers. They've made huge sacrifices over the past 5 years already. So we're ready to see a proposal to change or modify the multi-annual plan. Member States are asking for it, the Parliament's asking for it, and the sector is asking for it. Secondly, I think we need to carefully supervise the application of the new fisheries control regulation, specifically with delegated acts and implementing acts which stem from it. I think we need to look at this very closely with the fisheries sector, so we don't create any unnecessary additional burden for operators. And we don't want to add requirements which are not feasible. This has been one of the major topics from the CFP for many years. Something's been thought up and then it's been shown that it's not been feasible in reality. Thirdly, hopefully we'll have time for this, but I'd be keen to hear the details on the Oceans Pact. I think for me what's crucial here is that this strengthens the competitiveness of the fisheries sector and the aquaculture sector. We need to make sure that they're not forgotten, they're not sacrificed for other sectors which perhaps more influential, for example, tourism, mining or energy or environmental issues as well. So I'd be interested to hear a few more on that. And one final thing, the need to revise the common fisheries policy. I think the current assessment of the Commission should lead to a new proposal to revise the CFP. You know what the Parliament thinks about this. There's an overwhelming majority for that revision. So we'd like to see a new CFP. Hopefully it's something that we can move forward with, and something that we have always maintained is balance between fishing objectives and environmental objectives. We need to harmonise environmental policy with the common fisheries policy. Now, there's obviously the external aspects of the CFP, and also the possibility of improving using the EMFAF issues around generational renewal or decarbonisation. In order to do so, we need to move beyond this this taboo issue of modernising fleets. If we can achieve generational renewal and decarbonisation, we'll have to do this. Thank you, Mr. Mato. Mr. Rodriguez for the S&D now. Commissioner, it's very nice to see you here once again, and this is obviously your first visit to our committee, and congratulations on your appointment. Now, from a structural point of view, we have a diagnosis of the sector which is very concerning. Less boats, less fishing, less income, difficulty in accessing funds which are there to support fisheries, and transition towards sustainability. There is problems, for example, in the Mediterranean and Baltic, where there are major environmental issues. We need to see the fishing opportunities, which are very difficult. And this all leads to a general feeling from fishers that there is alienation from European institutions when it comes to the difficult reality that they face. Commissioner, we need to change this situation. That's why my first question is as follows. What measures is the Commission going to implement immediately to improve perspectives and revenue for the fisheries sector, and also for the small-scale fisheries sector? There's lots of decisions coming from the European Commission, and how can we make sure they're in line with the reality in the fishing areas, so we don't have this feeling from fishers that they feel that they're not understood, and we won't have a similar situation with the farmers. Now, from the Azores region, for the priorities that we'd like to highlight, the simplification, support to renovation of artisanal fishing fleet to over 30 years old. It's true that EMFAF funds have not been significant, and also how do we have incentives to bring new people and retain new people into the sector? Fairer distribution of revenue. How can we ensure it's more dignified profession? How can we ensure there's climate change mitigation, and how can we have compensation for reduction of the fishing fleet? Obviously, implementation of protected marine areas. This is a measure that we welcome, but will believe, hopefully, there will be funding for that. But how will that funding actually support key measures, for example, reforms or redirecting the fleet for other uses? Now, finally, compensation measures for outermost regions or, for example, the POSI support programs. These are challenges for the Azores, but they need European responses. Now, some final comments. The Ocean Pact, we've had nothing about funding for that. And when we look at the next MFF discussion, we'd like to know what you are thinking about funding for the Oceans Pact. Now, the Competitiveness Compass refers to the Ocean Pact, but doesn't refer to the CFP, fishes or sustainability of our seas, and the decisive contribution that they can make for a new era of innovation and development. This is something very important because we have the largest marine area in the world in terms of EEZs, and we represent 40%. Marine areas represent 40% of GDP.
Gracias, señor Rodríguez.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. And now for the Patriots, Mr. Dieperven.
Voorzitter, dank u wel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for your presentation and your vision of the future. I think we all agree that healthy oceans are very important for the environment, but also for the future of the whole fisheries sector. But at the same time, I think we have to be realistic. New sustainability measures can't lead to an extra bureaucratic burden, extra costs that are going to push our sector more and more into the corner. So there's the high fuel costs as well. There's unfair competition from outside the EU. You talked about that as well. How's the Commission going to guarantee that the Ocean Pact, and I think it's important, by the way, but is going to be a chance, an opportunity for European fishers rather than restricting them even more? Then, innovation. Innovative fisheries techniques can lead to, or technologies can lead to less fuel use. They can lead to better solutions for the environment, more sustainability. All of these things could be combined. The Commission shouldn't just be imposing rules, imposing laws, but has to be ambitious and courageous to embrace new technologies and to actually use them, to promote them and to use them. I'd like to ask you, Commissioner, what does the Commission think about this? And then, of course, there's the energy transition, other policies that come into play. But in the energy transition, what about nuclear energy? The Commission, how does the Commission see that? I mean, there are very different developments to use nuclear energy on a small scale. I mean, you're not going to put a nuclear reactor on top of a fishing vessel, obviously, but you can use small-scale plants. Well, I think I've used up all my time. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Royston, please.
Dank u wel, voorzitter. Om te beginnen sluit ik...
Thank you. First of all, I would like to endorse what my colleague, Mr. Dieperven, has just said. We need a healthy debate on new technologies in fisheries. And I think this is very important to use scientific facts, to look at the evidence, to look at all the scientific evidence, to look at all the technologies, cutting-edge technologies that are available in this sector. And then also, I would like to support the idea of working towards fewer rules. In order to foster competition, you need to have less of a burden in terms of rules. Now, does the Commission have a view to do that? I mean, there are ideas, of course, but what about specific measures for the fisheries sector? Would you be prepared to look at this particular measure, and also with regard to islands, and to ensure that that competition really is boosted? And then the Ocean Pact. You asked us to think about this. I think there are 2 points here that are essential. First of all, the fisheries and the coastal communities need to get together, to sit round the table and be involved in the development of the Ocean Pact. Make sure that they're involved as well. And then fisher people need enough space to work as fishers. So do you see that these two things could come into play in the Ocean Pact? Is there enough space, enough freedom to act for fishers so that they can carry out their professions after all? And then something else, and eels, for example, that's another thing that I think is very important. I was a rapporteur on eels, and we had a number of recommendations that we put forward to the Commission, and I would like to ask the Commissioner whether he would be prepared to accept the recommendations that we put forward on eels. Is the policy going to be changed? When it comes to eels, it's very one-sided in terms of reducing fishing in this area. But it's very important, however, to incentivize countries to implement the eel management plans. For example, migratory barriers are reduced or removed. It's very important to look at the details here. Is the Commissioner prepared to do that? And is he also prepared to set up a special group, an expert group for eel management to get everybody that is an expert in that area together around the table? Thank you.
Renew, señor.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen, for the Renew Group.
Og fra min side velkommen til vores kommissær.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Again, welcome to our committee. We're very pleased to be able to work with you, and we're very pleased to see what different proposals you can come up with. I have three questions. Firstly, Skagerrak. Norway has introduced certain limits when it comes to fish quotas, and that's a unilateral measure with no EU agreement. But the Norwegian fisheries can fish in Danish waters. This is something that is very concerning to us. Now, when it comes to fisheries control, the Commission said that we need to make a list of certain ports in relation to bureaucracy. Where are we with that on the Danish ports? There's no port which has been designated as being exempted from controls. So when will we get this list from the Commission? Simplification is extremely important, but it's something you've not mentioned enough as I see things. I think it's absolutely vital, and fishers want to see a reduction in bureaucracy. Now, the Ocean Pact is going to be published on the 25th of May. What does that actually entail? Is there a timeline for that? Do we know what's going to continue after that date, and how are the different stakeholders going to be involved? I'd also like to know what happens with the technological developments with the fishing engines.
Señor Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Ms. Levin for the Greens, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and dear Commissioner, welcome to the PECH Committee. I note that you are not only the Fisheries Commissioner, but you're also the Oceans Commissioner. So I do hope, and that's maybe my first question, if you're going to have a structured dialogue also with our colleagues in the ENVI Committee, since your mandate is much bigger than only fisheries. And this is not, unfortunately, the Oceans Committee. But I think we all recognize that without a healthy ocean, there will be no healthy fish stocks. But the contrary is also true. So without any healthy fish stocks, there will not be a healthy ocean. So I very much welcome the holistic approach of the Oceans Pact that you outlined, where we need a comprehensive framework which is implementable when it comes to oceans governance. And from our side, we very much want to see really a simplified governance framework for the ocean, where we can put together all the ocean-related policy areas within one governance framework. And I would like colleagues to reflect on the climate law and how that really puts together all the targets for the European Union in one framework, and making sure that all the policy areas that are affecting these objectives will be put in the same governance. And I think for the ocean we need binding targets. We have them already in a number of different legislative pieces, but we haven't put them all together. So I think the best way to simplify the governance would be to actually put forward a binding ocean law for us to really be able to relate with common agriculture policy, with pollution, chemicals, and all of the other areas that are affecting our ocean. And I'd like to see a strategy to shift from fish management to actual ocean management, and I wonder if the Commissioner agrees with that. Also like to see a scientific foundation where we actually take into account the dramatic shift in the climate that we're seeing already, which is affecting the ocean. Now, the Baltic Sea, I very much appreciate that the Commissioner is mentioning the Baltic Sea specifically, and we want to work very hard on that. And I would like to see a rescue plan for the Baltic Sea, because we really need to do something different now. We've been doing the same things for many, many years, and we're not seeing improvement. But the contrary, we're seeing a worsening of the situation in the Baltic Sea. So a new way of working would be absolutely necessary, and I wonder if the Commissioner agrees with that. Thank you.
Señora Furro.
Ms. Furro for the left, please. Good afternoon, Commissioner, and welcome to our committee. Thank you for your presentation. In this committee, I often hear about the need to strengthen food security and sovereignty in the EU, and that's something I agree with, but I don't always agree with the solutions which are put forward. For us, the best solution to achieve food sovereignty in terms of fisheries is specific support for small-scale fisheries in coastal areas. This is something that is beneficial for the areas and for the people. And the 2021 Farm to Fork plan did suggest that, but where are we with these commitments taken in 2021? Small-scale producers face a number of difficulties. They often don't have access to funds in the EMFAF, as we saw in the recent Guardian survey. Article 17 is supposed to favour small-scale farmers and should use it as clear criteria. Before we reopen the common fisheries policy, we need to ensure that the current rules are actually effectively applied, and something we're waiting for. Small-scale farmers are also face damaging techniques, for example, demersal sends. In 2022, the Commission committed to looking at this problem, which is denounced by the vast majority of French fishers, but also by Belgian fishers. You went to Ostend recently. What can the Commission do now? And where are we with the Horizon 2030 biodiversity aims? With the Court of Auditors highlighted the fact there was insufficient progress. So where are we with the Member States with eating the 30 by 30 aims for marine protected areas? Honestly, there's the Oceans Pact, which has been announced as a step in the right direction. Now we need specific measures. Thank you.
Pues muchas gracias. Finalizado.
Thank you very much. That's the coordinators. Commissioner, and I'll give you the floor to ask around 10 minutes, and then we'll open up to the other members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your constructive comments and the questions. I will try to address as many of them as possible. regarding the West Med map, I'm aware of the concerns on the West Med map. I received letters from the sector, from ministers of the area, and I know that there is a lot of concern. We take note of these concerns, and I would not exclude a possible amendment of the West Med map. We will look at the different options that are possible and that are available. However, please note that the possible amendment of the West Med map requires an impact assessment. That was what the Parliament requested in similar previous cases. So if we proceed with an amendment, then an impact assessment should be carried out, and this impact assessment, you know, that takes time. Regarding the new fisheries, the new control regulation, let me just underline that this was an important fisheries reform, and we are committed to timely implement it by adopting the necessary acts. And there are some dates before the 2026, 2027, 2028 deadlines. What I want to stress is that the implementing the revised control regulation will pay particular attention at reducing the red tape and bureaucracy. It promotes the digitalization. We need to know all the information regarding the fish catches. And we need to know what we fish in order to manage better the fisheries sector. So digitalization, efficiency, simplification, and streamlining of reporting obligations are the driving forces, and these parameters led the co-legislators to the approval of this regulation. So we are focusing on the timely implementation, and if there are issues that we need to address in the process, we are open to discuss them. In relation to the Ocean Pact, let me just underline that the competitiveness of the fisheries and aquaculture sector will be central in the Ocean Pact. Of course, the first pillar is securing the health of the ocean, because without the healthy ocean, we cannot have sustainable fisheries and aquaculture. But if we secure the health of the ocean, then we can have also, we can focus on the competitiveness of the fisheries and aquaculture sectors, and definitely the competitiveness of these sectors will be central in the Oceans Pact. The evaluation of the CFP, as I mentioned before, it will take into consideration the three pillars of sustainability: the economic, the social, and the environmental sustainability. Issues like the ones that were mentioned by the members of the Parliament, the need for the fleet modernization, decarbonization, generational renewal, safety, all these issues will be addressed through the evaluation. And I repeat that the weaknesses that will be pointed out by the evaluation will be taken into consideration for a possible revision. But in the meantime, we have to focus on implementing the CFP regulation. And we don't need to receive the evaluation of the CFP as a signal of relaxation. It is very important to continue implementing what the Common Fisheries Regulation foresees. Regarding the measures to improve the revenues of the fishers and improve the conditions prevailing in the fisheries sector, I think that in order to achieve better conditions for our fishers, we have to modernize, we have to improve the framework under which they operate, and this is the Common Fisheries Policy. The Common Fisheries Policy is under evaluation. So I feel that with the improvements that will result from the CFP evaluation, we will improve also the conditions prevailing in the fisheries sector and the conditions in which our fishers operate. For the Ocean Pact, let me just repeat that it will be developed through an extensive consultation. We have the high-level dialogue, we have the ocean dialogues, we have the youth dialogues, we have the visits to the coastal areas where we receive direct feedback from the local stakeholders. All this information will be gathered and will be utilized towards developing the Oceans Pact. And yes, I don't know which will be the structure of the MFF, but what I can commit is that I will try to make sure that there is enough support through the next MFF for implementing what the Ocean Pact will include. Reduction of bureaucracy is a main priority, not only for my portfolio, but for the whole European Commission. And I am fully committed to our simplification agenda. I will actively contribute with my services to reaching our objective to reduce administrative burden. Let me tell you that I have already asked DG Mare to present a plan to screen all the policies that are under the Directorate General and indicate where we can reduce administrative burden, where we can reduce red tape, and we will soon discuss the report that is prepared by DG Mare. I feel, as I mentioned before, that fully implementing the new fisheries control regulation will already generate important simplification and burden reduction. After all, digitalization is one of the new regulation's key features. But in any way, we will, as I mentioned before, we will screen all our policies in order to see where we can reduce red tape. About the energy transition and the possibility of using nuclear energy, indeed, this is not under my portfolio. I mean, the possibility of using nuclear energy. What I can tell you is that it's underway, is ongoing. The energy transition, the development of the energy transition roadmap of the fisheries sector, and the study for the evolution of the fishing fleet. These two exercises will feed into the CFP evaluation, and having all this information, I'm sure that we will take the most appropriate decisions regarding the energy transition of our sector. I fully agree that we need new technologies and innovations in the sector. We need to modernize our sector. We need to make it less harmful and more sustainable. And definitely, the new technologies can contribute towards this direction. Let me just mention that adopting more sustainable, modern, and innovative technologies in the fisheries sector will be one of the main pillars of the new European Ocean Research and Innovation Strategy. I have already mentioned the consultation exercise that is taking place about the Ocean Pact. Now, about the small-scale fisheries, it is very important that we recognize their role. They consist of 76% of the European fishing fleet, and they are an integral part of our coastal communities. And they need our support, and we will focus through the evaluation of the CFP to the support of the small-scale fishers. And in the meantime, objective and transparent criteria on the allocation of fishing opportunities, the implementation of Article 17 of the CFP remains essential for small-scale fishers. And I can announce that a vademecum on the allocation of fishing opportunities is under preparation and will be published within this year. It will help member states to improve their systems of quota allocation. Okay. We took note about your question on the eels, and we will come back to this issue. About our relations with Norway and the UK, I just wanted to inform you that I had meetings with the competent ministers. Both meetings were positive meetings. I made clear that we need to secure access to traditional fishing grounds for our European fishers and access to share quotas. And what we agreed is to continue to have meetings on a regular basis so that we monitor the developments of the bilateral discussions. With the UK, the teams that will start negotiations are preparing, and we will soon start negotiations so that we will be ready well before the June 2026. Yes, as I was committed during my hearings, we will try to place the fisheries file on the wider agenda of the bilateral relations with these two countries. Okay. Yes. I will just answer one note only about the. I'm also commissioner for the oceans. Actually, I was my first invitations from the Environment Committee, and I was there. So definitely, we pay attention to the ocean, and I agree that we need to adopt a holistic approach for the Baltic Sea. That's why I'm not going alone to visit the area and organize a meeting with the ministers of the area, but we are going along with the Commissioner on the Environment, and possibly the Commissioner of Agriculture will also join us. And as I mentioned before, the CFP evaluation will build on the positive aspects. We will not discard the positive aspects of the CFP regulation, because there are positive aspects, but we need to address the weaknesses. And in the meantime, definitely we need to focus on the proper implementation of the Common Fisheries Regulation.
Muchas gracias, señor comisario.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I'd like to open up the floor, and Mr. Arnautoglu is the first speaker. Mr. Kadis, good afternoon, and welcome once again. It's always a great pleasure to see you. 1.5 minutes, says the chair, Mr. Arnautoglu. Yes, of course. We have various problems to grapple with, and from what I've heard, there are colleagues who are more from Scandinavia, especially Sweden and Denmark, are often complaining about Norway. And since I come from the south, and with all the problems we have, I always assumed that there were good channels of communication between Sweden and Norway and Denmark and Norway, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And I don't know why, because usually there is quite strong communication. It's just the way it's been traditionally. In the south and southeast, we grapple with other problems. We've got Turkey, and among other issues, we've got illegal fisheries, and illegal fishing is really has really skyrocketed. So I'm wondering whether there aren't levers that the European Commission can use. Can't we stand united? The EU is losing clout. No one's paying attention to us. No one is taking us seriously. And this isn't just happening in fisheries, but in many other areas as well. So I'm wondering what we can say to citizens as their representatives when these issues crop up. The situation is out of control. I'm in favor of good neighbourly relations and dialogue, but at some point you need to draw a line.
Muchas gracias, señora Lecal.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lekalenek. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Commissioner, thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you very much for the answers to my colleagues' questions. Now, on the Oceans Pact, I think it's extremely important to have a strong industrial and maritime strategy. We need to have a kind of maritime reflex that goes across all our policies, whether it's the Clean Industrial Deal or others. We are a very strong maritime power, and we carry clout. We have innovative and competitive industries that we've got to support. Yesterday, with a member of your cabinet attending, I organized an event on technology and artificial intelligence applied to fisheries. And we know that we can improve observation on the basis of scientific evidence. So I'm very pleased that you've said that we need to focus on IUU, and my colleague has also just mentioned this. So now there's going to be a debate on marine protected areas. You yourself talk about the competition to accede to maritime space, and we have a very practical case to deal with. It's very topical, and it's the post-Brexit situation. You touched upon this. Marine protected areas, MPAs, were designated almost unilaterally by the British, and I'm saying this because I have guests from Haute-France here, from Normandy and Brittany, and therefore, Commissioner, do you think that we'll be able to agree on a shared definition accepted by fishers on what will be allowed to do in marine protected areas? Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Milan Mon. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Commissioner, I'll be telegraphic. The Oceans Pact. I think that the message has to be very clear, at least as far as I'm concerned. Fisheries has to be at the heart of the pact. Those most interested in protecting the oceans is our fishers. We don't want to protect the oceans by working against fishers. Fisheries is strategic for our food security. It gives jobs to millions of people, and it's part and parcel of the identity and prosperity of others. The threats lie elsewhere: climate change, environmental pollution, maritime transport, plastics, and so on. Fuels, but it's not fishers that are the threat to our oceans. In fact, they're the ones that are the most concerned about ocean cleanliness. So we have to make sure that we can reconcile oceans with fisheries as an activity, and we have to make sure that our fishers are competitive. And I'm very pleased that this Oceans Pact is included in the competitiveness compass. And I hope that this will help us make our fisheries sector more competitive while at the same time protecting our oceans. I have two questions in relation to this. Regional fisheries organizations have to be boosted, and especially when it comes to the 2023 High Seas Pact. So ROPs are extremely important. And then there are marine protected areas. There are other areas, the complementary measures as well. It's not just about banning. We can reconcile biodiversity without having to impose bans on fisheries. I'm worried about the free trade agreement with Thailand. I don't know if you're aware, especially the impact on the canning industry. I've mentioned this before. And then control. Control, yes, but dialogue. Dialogue, dialogue, dialogue. Many are listening. Your teams are listening. People have been involved in the fisheries control regulation negotiations. We have to look at the implementing regulations. I sent you a letter back in November on this, but I haven't received a reply. Thank you. Mr. González Casares.
Gracias, Presidenta, y gracias, Comisario, por venir.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you very much for coming here and explaining things. You said you were going to change course, but 3 months have gone by, and we haven't really seen you change course. The Mediterranean is an example. It's true that you attended the last committee meeting, but we want you to take measures. We want to see you change course. Last month, your Director General did not meet expectations. And I want concrete examples. The Mediterranean, we need to reform. You talked about impact assessments. I can tell you what the impact of this, the impact on the Mediterranean is 29 fishing days. That is the impact on our fishers. So I think you need to put something on the table on this. Now, the fisheries control regulation, the sector is worried about its implementation. The list of third country disembarkation posts has not been published 8 months later, but my country has sent the data. The sector is also saying that there is a regulation section on tropical tuna and tolerance, and there are problems there. So once again, I agree, and I agree with Mr. Milan Mon that we have to be very careful with our negotiations with Thailand. Fisheries shouldn't be used as a bargaining chip. So now, I hope that the European Commission will be able to strike a balance between the three pillars of fisheries. We need to see this in practice. This year is an opportunity. Mrs. Jamais, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. A lot has been said already, but I would like to share a more overall comment on maritime diplomacy or oceans diplomacy. This is about power and sovereignty, especially for a country such as France, because France is the second biggest maritime power. I'm sure you're aware of this. And of course, we have also overseas territories and departments. And that is why we should have a maritime destiny. But your work is focusing on what is happening in international waters. I think this is a tactical mistake, because if we want to have clout, we as member states need to develop our own exclusive economic zones. We've got the Horizon Europe program. And we're just giving a bit of money here and there, 1 million for this, 1 million for our marine ecosystems. This is real fragmentation. It's not a political vision. And we need to look at member state sovereignty. We need to protecting our heritage and our fishers, member state sovereignty and protecting what we have. This is the only way that there can be useful cooperation in Europe and around the world. And it is the only way that we can really bring pressure to bear and show our clout on the international stage. It's crucial for our oceans. We're all here for them. They account for 2/3 of our planet. And unfortunately, we don't know enough about our oceans. Now, competitiveness. We all want to be competitive, but more rules? No.
Muchas gracias, señora Miranda.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Miranda.
Presidenta, señor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for coming to the Fisheries Committee in the European Parliament. It's difficult to share your optimism. Yesterday, this came out in the Galician press. It says that the highest number of loss of those involved in fisheries. We are a fishing power, the largest fishing power in Europe, as you just said. I'd like to convey this problem. In 2024. There's a 5% drop in those involved in fisheries. That's the drop was even more significant in the age group of 25 to 29-year-olds, almost 12%. Currently, 18 people are leaving in fishing and aquaculture every week in my country. Working at sea needs to be done in dignity. So I'd like to remember those in the Via Betancio accident 3 years ago. I was with the families this Saturday in the port. The sector is not going through a good period. The sector and the profession is not attractive. It's right now that the Commission needs to recognise the importance of food security and that fisheries should have the place that it deserves. We need to invest more in generational renewal, improving working conditions at sea, and coastal fisheries and artisanal fisheries. That's why I will change language, and I'd like to speak to all of those women who work on boats and those who work in the different scientific councils, those who are suffering sexual harassment, such as Carmen and Celia, and also this is something that's also affecting the fisheries in Galicia as well, where women who are on boats, whether for science or for fisheries, we need to show solidarity with them.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Mr Flanagan.
Welcome, Commissioner, again to the committee. Now that the public consultation period for the European Oceans Pact has been closed, there's an opportunity for a more coherent, sustainable and inclusive approach to ocean governance. And you asked what our expectations and key deliverables are. And in my view, to ensure a real tangible benefit for small-scale fishers and to ensure, as you said yourself, that policies are aligned with the realities on the ground, the Ocean Pact has to guarantee a variety of things. And for me, security of tenure and recognition of customary fishing rights is important, implementation of a differentiated approach to fisheries governance, meaningful participation of small-scale fishers in decision-making, protection of small-scale fishing areas from competing marine uses, as was brought up by many other members here, a fair and equitable allocation of fishing opportunities and integration of traditional ecological knowledge in fisheries management. And we're always on about new technologies. We need to look at what has worked for generations and what has actually been low-tech but highly sustainable. So the question is, how will you ensure that the EU's small-scale fishers can operate in an inclusive and supportive blue economy with such real and tangible benefits? And will you commit to adopting a differentiated approach to management for small-scale, low-impact fishers by ensuring the full application of the CFP Article 17, because it isn't working at the moment, which is meant to prioritise small-scale, low-impact fishers in spatial designations, quota allocations and policy decisions? Because everyone here seems to agree they're really, really important. We know about the high percentage. 87.5% of fishers in Ireland come from fish out of boats of less than 12 metres. But everyone seems to agree something should be done, but it isn't actually happening. So what will change and what can you do? Because something needs to change.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Mr Sargiacomo.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr Kadis, for being here. Thank you for your introductory remarks. And thank you for really giving us very detailed answers. Now, I'd like to talk about marine protected areas. I'd like to say that the British authorities are using this protection to throw our vessels out. And then we have to think about the Nice conference too. Then there's a contradictory message to the citizens who live along the coastline. It seems we want to exclude them. This might be a little bit exaggerated and sound like a caricature of the situation, but that's what many feel. But I want to put forward an alternative in a scientific journal, and an international one, and that is wealthy marine areas or prosperous marine areas. So we want to protect diversity, but local governance as well. So we want a positive approach and a positive way of striking a balance so that we can achieve the 2030 goals of the UN. I'm thinking about the Gironde Estuary and other areas. We have the conference in Nice in June, and it will be bringing together scientists, local decision makers, the Commission, and the fishers themselves. Thank you.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you very much. Vice Chairman Smith.
Dear Commissioner, welcome to our Fisheries Committee once again today, and thank you for making yourself available. In our previous meetings with you, we've already heard and discussed a lot about the Oceans Pact, as well as the evaluation of the CFP. So far, we've been informed by you and the services that the Commission was planning to present an evaluation of the CFP at the end of this year. However, in the Commission's work programme, which was published last week, the CFP evaluation is no longer mentioned. Why and when will it be? We've already discussed some aspects of this, and I believe that the sector is eagerly awaiting the evaluation, especially in the light of controversial elements, such as the landing obligation, which negatively affects the economic viability of fisheries. Much has been said already about eel management, which I can subscribe to. I would like to address the second topic, though, namely the increasing scarcity of maritime space. In the Fisheries Committee, we will soon be working on a report on the impact of the implementation of the MSP Directive on fisheries in selected fishing areas and sea basins. In this context, terms like coexistence or multi-use are often used. However, certain types of fisheries are automatically excluded when it comes to coexistence within offshore wind farms, whether for safety reasons or other concerns. I'm well aware that maritime spatial planning is the responsibility of member states and that the Commission only provides a framework. Nevertheless, how can the Commission ensure that fishers and aquaculture are involved from the outset in the planning of offshore areas? I would even say that they must be involved. And do you agree, Commissioner, that active fishing and aquaculture in offshore wind farms is now often practically excluded due to the reasons mentioned above? Lastly, aquaculture in the vicinity of Natura 2000 sites and established use within these sites should also be enabled by providing proper guidance to our fishers and our aquaculture sectors. Thank you very much.
Señora Ní Mhurchú.
Thank you, Madame la Présidente, and Commissioner, thank you for coming to our committee. I want to speak about the shores of Ireland very briefly. They have sustained generations of fishers because fishing is at the heart of our coastal communities, from fishing villages right across Ireland South, where I represent, such as Untitled, Chapter, Castletown Bear in Cork, Kylemore Quay in Wexford, Carrigaholt in Clare and on Ryan, Igunde Portlauriga. Countless fishing families and their communities rely on the sea for their livelihoods. It's preserving, Commissioner, not only incomes, but also the fabric of our culture and the Irish language that you heard me speaking there in Gaeltacht regions, Irish-speaking regions. But Irish fishers, they're burdened by inexorable quotas that fail to reflect the vastness of our waters. Whilst we contribute 12% of the EU's maritime territory, we are allocated just a mere 5.6% of the fishing quotas. And this is in stark imbalance when compared to other countries, which, despite having smaller coastlines, they receive up to 40% more quota in the North East Atlantic. So the 2025 quota cuts to key stocks like mackerel and prawns have had severe economic consequences and will continue to do so. And it's compounded by ongoing overfishing by non-EU nations, particularly Norway. Norway's overfishing of mackerel and blue whiting threatens our stocks in Ireland, our livelihoods, Irish fishers. They cannot bear the brunt of these challenges alone. My question to you, Commissioner, are as follows, threefold and quickly. Can you implement and confirm that you will implement stricter measures against non-EU fishing overfishing, especially by Norway? Can you ensure fair quota allocations that recognise Ireland's unique position? And can you provide sufficient bycatch quotas to prevent the forced halt of fishing operations? Goramila Magat, and I look forward to meeting you in Cork when you come to Ireland on Maritime Day.
Gracias, señor Bayada.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bayada.
And Efcharisto to the Commissioner, and I say thank you because you show respect to this House, and I really hope that your services, your fellow colleagues, and also your boss shows respect to this House. And I won't be talking about the Mediterranean because my colleague asked you a very clear question. I will be asking you about intergenerational renewal and the renewal of the ageing fleet. Firstly, will you be updating the state aid rules for fisheries to reflect those of agriculture, which are more flexible to allow for transfer between generations, transferring vessels from an old fisher to a young and new fisher to achieve intergenerational renewal? Secondly, will you tell the College to have an MFF that is flexible and allows for increased investments on board to support safety, green transition, decarbonisation and modernisation, especially for our small-scale vessels? And this must also be reflected in the CFP that you are evaluating. Additionally, it is also essential to ensure that the fossil fuel taxation through the ETD is not banned unless there are viable alternatives for fishers, especially small-scale fishers, and which are available for them. And finally, I heard your comment about the non-sustainable fisheries file, and as rapporteur and as already discussed with you bilaterally, the Parliament is doing its job very expeditedly and moving very fast on a very fast timeline. And in fact, I will be presenting my report to my colleagues in a few minutes, and I'm working very close with the shadows for swift adoption and to ensure that we find a deal in this current presidency. Thank you, Commissioner.
Gracias, señora Borras.
Thank you, Mrs. Borras.
Sí, gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Commissioner, thank you very much for your presentation here in the committee, but you won't be surprised if I say that the Commission's fisheries policy is a disaster. It uses the excuse of protecting the oceans, and it is slaughtering our fishers. It's suffocating them. It's killing off their way of life and killing off fisheries communities, and it is endangering our food security. We're saying that we want to protect our oceans, but the real guardians of the sea are fishers. They're the ones who clean tons of residues. They say that foreign fleets overfish our fish, and they're the ones who are trying to make sure that our marine ecosystems are balanced. Without them, we would have an abundant seas and oceans. So why are you imposing quotas and restrictions on the European fleet, while at the same time foreign fleets are overfishing and they're not meeting the same standards? Now, the multi-annual plan for demersal fishing, we need to overhaul that. We need up-to-date figures and to strike a balance between preserving marine ecosystems and making sure the fisheries sector can survive. Are you going to make sure that we have proper data and that you work hand in glove with the fisheries? It's easy to restrict and to give handouts from the comfort of an office, but it isn't easy to take bold decisions that really help our fishers. And last but not least, you've given us some good news that you want to reduce red tape and overhaul our fleet, but what specific measures are going to take? Do you have a real strategy to ensure the sector is sustainable, or are you just going to give handouts and a bit of money here and there while the sector dies off?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for mentioning the Baltic Sea specifically. I really appreciate you doing that, and while you didn't mention that one of the main factors of the ecosystem collapse in the Baltic Sea is actually overfishing. And the ones who are seeing this firsthand is the fishers themselves, the small-scale fishermen and the recreational fisheries. And I am very concerned to hear that in this committee there is a lot of misunderstanding about this, that people think that you can raise the quotas and then you still have as much fish in the sea left, because you do not. And the problem with eutrophication, a hard word to say, in the Baltic Sea is mainly because of overfishing, actually. I guess you know this. But I also want to say that in recent weeks, many Swedes have been watching a beautifully but horrific documentary called The Kingdom of Fish. And we are outraged about how we manage our waters. The situation is completely unsustainable. We can see that giant trawlers are sweeping up fish like vacuum cleaners. But my concern here and my question to you is about the small-scale and low-impact fisheries and the recreational fisheries that are not often mentioned here. How are you planning to see that their influence is enhanced with the Ocean Pact when we have the decision-making processes related to marine governance and fisheries policy? Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Y ahora me toca.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to speak as an MEP, Commissioner. So the fishers have a lot of hope in the new Commission. So thank you very much for giving impetus to this and for the Oceans Pact. Now, what this committee is asking for, and I agree, is that when it comes to the blue economy, fisheries hasn't figured prominently. So in the Oceans Pact, I hope that as Fisheries Commissioner, you will make sure that fisheries is really at the heart of this. This is vital for generational renewal. It's extremely important if we're to work on the synergies that fisheries needs in the future. And to mention food, which you talked about at the beginning, this committee was planning to send a letter to Commissioner Hansen so that the food strategy include fish as a protein. And I'm very glad that this is going to be the case because this is extremely important. 70% of the food we consume here in Europe comes from outside the EU. And to achieve what we want to achieve, we have to get rid of red tape in aquaculture, because that has an impact on our food, and we would like reciprocity clauses in agreements. So we want other non-EU member states to meet the same standards. We have to bear in mind that consumption of fish and shellfish is going down, and that is why member states have to grasp every opportunity to promote the consumption of fish and shellfish. Now, there are strong ties to the seas and oceans. I'm not going to talk about my country and my community. We're all aware of this. It has to be protected in the Oceans Pact. Now, we're very pleased that you've mentioned an impact assessment and what we need to do to overhaul the Mediterranean regulation. I think that there is time to do this, and the members of the committee are here to help. I hope that when it comes to the tax and quotas at the end of the year, we won't find ourselves in the same situation because the Mediterranean is in a better situation. We need to work quickly to give solutions to our fishers. We must be bold. We mustn't be held back by fear. And we need to focus on small-scale fisheries as well. We have fishers, we have big companies as well, but they're finding it difficult in the Atlantic with bureaucracy and sanctions, and we're being asked to make sure that we don't have similar problems in the Indian Ocean. I know that you've had a lot of speakers. This is almost like a second hearing. I don't know if you feel the same way, but we really appreciate the fact that you're spending so much time answering each and every single question. I think there's one MEP, Mrs. Jan Courtin, who's a vice chair, and I believe she would like to comment before we give the floor back to the Commissioner to reply to everyone. Thank you very much.
Cher Costas, cette année... Thank you, Commissioner. This year will be very important for the ocean. We're preparing, of course, the Ocean Pact, but also will be welcoming in Nice the UN conference. And we're working very hard on this. And my group, Renew, will soon be presenting a report. And we, of course, want to ensure that the blue economy is focused on very much, and we give a lot of space to that, ensuring that we have a sustainable blue economy. We will be looking at the method and also governance. On the method, the global strategy, world strategy, shouldn't forget the local aspect, the local and the regional aspect. The pact needs to involve our maritime regions in all of these specificities, and also all the different territories, for example, Normandy, which is my territory. And also we want an interinstitutional approach to ensure that the structure of our policies linked with the ocean are promising ones. So we want to make sure that all the stakeholders get together and get involved. Mr. Costas, you can count on our support because we really do support this Ocean Pact. It puts Europe at the forefront of the world in this. Thank you.
Pues muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to give the floor to the Commissioner. He has the final word. He'll be answering the questions put to him by MEPs. And I'd like to thank you very much for paying such close attention and for your patience. I know it's quite late now. Commissioner.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Thank you very much, Carmen. I got a lot of questions, so I'm going to try and be brief so that I can answer as many questions as possible. There was a question on possible violations carried out by Turkey and complaints that we've received. I'd like to say that the EU's position is crystal clear. International law has to be respected, and there are no exceptions whatsoever. So when we have well-documented complaints, then, of course, it goes without saying that the EU steps in. We're trying to work together with Turkey and all our other partners within the context of regional fisheries organizations. And once again, we want all agreements to be respected. I'd like to mention a regulation that Thomas Bajada is working on. This regulation is going to be a very important tool that we can use in order to deal with possible non-sustainable practices carried out by countries that are fishing in areas that the EU is also interested in. I agree with the comments that were made on the Oceans Pact. This Oceans Pact is going to take a holistic approach. The Oceans Pact will make sure that fishers are at the heart of it. It will be looking at fisheries and aquaculture, but we must bear in mind that if these sectors are to be sustainable, and if we want them to thrive and have a future, then they have to be able to operate in a healthy environment. And that is why the Oceans Pact has to factor in the environmental dimension. The Oceans Pact will be looking at fisheries competitiveness, and that is very obvious given that that the Oceans Pact has been included in the competitiveness compass that was recently unveiled by the European Commission. Now, on what the UK has been doing when it comes to marine protected areas, we have been keeping a very close eye on what's been happening. And if it is found that the United Kingdom is operating outside the regulatory framework, then again we will step in, and we have stepped in. This is the case with a species called sand eel. So sand eel is a case where we have moved to arbitration. So that is pretty clear because this is covered by the agreement with the UK. So we might have to do the same in other cases. If these cases are well documented, if we have the necessary information, we might have to take similar action in the future. Now, our aim is to shore up regional fisheries organization because we think that in these regional fisheries organizations, we can make sure that third parties and non-EU member countries come up to our high standards, because we don't want it to be the other way around. We don't want laxer standards. We want the others to come up to our level. I am up to speed with what is happening with the with the agreement with Thailand, and I'd like to tell you that I have met representatives in this area. I've also had discussions with my colleague who is responsible for trade. So the Trade Commissioner is the one who's responsible for negotiating the agreement with Thailand, and I can assure you that we will do everything we can to protect European interests. Now, on what our intentions are and whether we've changed our minds, I believe that we have showed our intentions from the very first Council of Ministers that we participated in. That is the one where we decided on fishing opportunities in many different parts of Europe. So, we met the fishers themselves, we listened to their concerns, and after that, we managed to take a unanimous decision. In fact, every single member state supported this decision. We didn't curb fishing opportunities, especially not in the Western Mediterranean. What we decided was to factor in the scientific advice that we had, but at the same time, we adopted measures that will make fisheries more sustainable. And the result will be that we will keep giving the opportunity to fishers to continue fishing, but in a more sustainable manner. Now, on the need to overhaul the Western Mediterranean Management Plan, let me say that we cannot ignore what is enshrined in legislation. You are the European Parliament, and in previous similar situations, you said you wanted an impact assessment before we move forward with a reform. And I think that we need to take the same approach, and that is what is enshrined in legislation. Now, on ocean diplomacy. Ocean diplomacy is going to be a key pillar in the Oceans Pact. The European Union is striving to conclude international agreements, and an example is the High Seas Treaty. The High Seas Treaty is to protect biodiversity in waters that aren't within national jurisdiction. So we are working with regional fisheries organizations, and these procedures are procedures that we can harness to promote EU interests. And then, of course, there can also be bilateral and multilateral agreements with countries where we have shared interest. Fisheries and aquaculture are sectors that are extremely important from a food security point of view. They're vital when it comes to food security in Europe. And I think that it couldn't be illustrated better than by the European Commission communication that came out today. This European Commission communication is on the vision on agriculture and food. In this communication, the European Commission clearly presents fisheries and aquaculture as a sector of strategic importance. And I think that this is extremely important, and it sends out the right message to the fisheries sector in the EU. We've taken note of your proposals in relation to the Oceans Pact. We've taken note of your recommendations and will definitely be factoring them in. I already talked about small-scale fisheries. I already said that it is of utmost importance to support small-scale fisheries, and we're really focusing on what we can do to help them. In my introductory remarks, I said that during the CFP evaluation, we'll be looking at the issue of landing obligations. We adopted this regulation in order to curtail the huge amount of fish that is discarded back into the sea. That is not sustainable. That's not good for our fishers either. So if we can find alternative ways of registering or recording these discards, then we're not going to take a dogmatic approach. We are open to looking at how we can manage this enormous challenge. Now, on maritime spatial planning, we have examples where there is multiple use of maritime space. So we have multiple usage that is very successful. And we believe that it falls within the remit of the member states to decide on what their maritime spatial planning is going to look like. And most member states have submitted their spatial plans. What the European Commission will do is monitor and check the implementation of these plans. What should have done, and I hope will happen, is a broader consultation involving fishers so that we can hear their views. There is no doubt about the fact that there needs to be enough space left for fishers. They need to be able to make sure that they have the space to carry out their fishing activities sustainably. Now, Natura 2000. The Natura 2000 network does not ban human activities. On the contrary, Natura 2000 and its network says that these kind of activities can take place as long as there isn't a negative impact on the species that are being protected, on the habitats and ecosystems that are being protected. So that is what the Natura 2000 network rules say. If the fishing is compatible with the protected species, then the fisheries can continue. But of course, if it's not compatible, then it cannot continue and we'll have to adopt the necessary measures. Now, on Ireland, we've had discussions with Irish MEPs, and we'll be able to see more when we visit Ireland. I explained what we'll be doing. I explained our approach to the UK and Norway as well. I think that in this case, it's extremely important for us to adopt the regulation on non-sustainable fisheries of neighbouring countries that are fishing in areas that are of a European interest. And I think at this point, I'd really like to thank Thomas for the work that he's done. We've had discussions on this, and I firmly believe that we will soon have a very important tool in our hands. And we'll be able to use this tool in order to deal with these kind of situations. The same applies to the North Atlantic, but it also applies to the Mediterranean. Now, on state aid, this doesn't fall within my remit. We could discuss this as perhaps an additional incentive, and I think that is something that you mentioned too. We could discuss this with the competent commissioner, and that's why we've taken note of your requests. On the green transition, We will be taking decisions on the basis of the CFP evaluation, but we will also do it on the basis of the fisheries energy transition as well. This should be done by the end of this year, beginning of 2026. We're going to have to take decisions, there's no doubt about it, and we're going to have to find a way to provide support for the overhaul of our fleet. We want to make sure that our fleet can become a cleaner fleet. Now, on energy taxation, again, this doesn't fall within my portfolio, but of course, as far as I know, this is being discussed by the Council, and it'll be up to the Member States to decide what the final decision on this matter is going to be. Now, I disagree with the statement that the CFP is disastrous. The statistics from the economic analysis that has been carried out, in the case of most fishers, they can earn a living. It is a profitable job. And if you look at how the CFP has been implemented and what results we have, then you'll see that 10 years ago, less than 10% of catches were fished sustainably. But now the figure that we have is actually almost 80%. Instead of less than 10%. So this huge jump is not a coincidence. The reason that we have these figures is because we're implementing a very serious policy, and we've got to build on the positive aspects of the CFP. I agree that there is room for improvement, and that's why we're here. We're going to work hand in glove in order to improve the common fisheries policy. Now, Carmen, I can assure you that fisheries and aquaculture are going to be at the heart of the Oceans Pact. I'd really like to reassure you. We are going to give it the necessary importance. I've said this on numerous occasions. And to wrap up, let me comment on the Oceans Conference that is going to take place in Nice in the summer. We have three overarching goals at Nice. First of all, we'll be unveiling the Oceans Pact and presenting it as a model for the rational use of our seas and oceans. And we're hoping that maybe other regions in the world, other parts of the world will follow in our footsteps. We hope that with the action we will take, that we will adopt the BBNJ, that's what it's known. It's about biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, the BBNJ. And we'll also be working towards setting up a platform that will bring together scientists and policymakers. It's called IPOS, International Platform on Ocean Sustainability. We hope that we'll be able to set up this platform, and this platform will be able to feed into our policies so we can ensure that they are spot on and sustainable. Thank you.
Pues muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commissioner. We hope you'll come to this committee very soon. I'd like to thank you very much for your answers. I'd like to thank you for your commitments. And if you don't mind, we'll take a little break in the proceedings of this committee before we move on to the next amending regulation. I just want to take a break in order to say goodbye to the Commissioner.